Three, two, one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sista Docs Exhale. This is one of several episodes brought to you in this season by these sisters here. Sista Docs, introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lyrical Tay. My focus is faculty diversity in higher education.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cupid, and my specialization is sister circles and mentoring for Black women.
And I am Dr. Tahira Chloe Medee, known as 99, and I am a community psychologist. And we are all members of a sister circle that was formed while we were getting our PhDs. And we want to talk about what we went through on our journeys in higher education and professionally. And we'll also cover a range of topics. And we will also exhale. So Dr. Tate is going to introduce our guests for this episode when we talk about imposter syndrome.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. 99. Dr. L is an early career psychologist currently completing a postdoctoral health psychology residency and pursuing licensure as a clinical psychologist. She completed her PhD studies with a focus on clinical psychology and behavioral medicine. She earned both her master's in community psychology and bachelor's in psychology and biology from amazing HBCU institutions. On a personal note, Dr. L is an immensely proud Houstonian who will gladly talk your ear off about her hometown and Beyonce.
You remember.
This topic is so important in terms of mental health, Dr. L. What do we mean by imposter syndrome?
Thank you all so much for that warm welcome. And let's just jump right in. Because when we think about imposter syndrome, it's really important to talk about. It's one of those things that may be real for folks, but we don't often mention it, especially in mixed company or in professional settings, almost like we don't want to talk out of turn. But researchers coined the term, two women researchers in 1978 from Georgia State University coined this term, imposter syndrome, to describe a phenomenon that looks like a lot of different kinds of symptoms. It can look like depression, anxiety, low self-confidence. And what makes it so specialized is that these symptoms really cluster in these groups of high achieving women. That's where this research emerged from, that high achieving women in PhD programs in the 70s were all coming forth in this particular research qualitative interview and talking about how they felt depressed, how they felt like they were frauds, how they felt like, oh, I'm not good enough, but everybody thinks I am, and I don't want to get found out, almost as if they were faking how smart and wonderful and talented they are. So imposter syndrome is something that can be very insidious and, in fact, affects particularly high achieving women.
And why is it that high achieving women feel this way?
Well, there's research out there, and then there's my personal experience, which I'm happy to share. Okay, I'll give you me. All right, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of the research and a little bit of who I am. So in 1978, Clance and Imes were the two scholars who really started to put this out there in the literature. But they found that when they started to really kind of try to tear this thing apart and dig deep into it, it really came from certain types of early childhood experiences. It came from childhood experiences of maybe a person growing up in a family and being compared maybe to their other siblings or other family members who were seen as the ideal one, and they were like the black sheep. So that kind of go throughout their whole life with this kind of, well, I'm not as good as such and such, and I'm not as good as such and such. And there could be a reaction that you form to that. It could be to believe it, or it could be to just like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I'm going to go to school for the longest. I'm going to do the most. I'm going to make that money. I'm going to be that bougie auntie. That's going to be me, you know? And so even though you're living your life, you're living your best Diane Carroll, Dominique Devereaux life, you don't always feel it. Like you don't believe it. And it's almost this fear that at any given second, the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath you, right? And then like everybody's going to figure it out. Another way to think about it is like the opposite of a fundamental attribution error Like if we think about what that literature tells us is that usually people have this error that they attribute other people's success to their circumstances, but their personal success to their personal attributes. Like, I got this job because I am what that is. You got this job because your uncle works here, right? That's a fundamental attribution error, but like imposter syndrome is almost the opposite. It's like you guys all got here. We were all in PhD programs together. I remember sitting with you guys in a writing session. It was in the room with the whiteboard, and I was just blown back by like how brilliant you women were, how like talented you were. And you were just like, extemporaneous off the dome. And I was like, oh, I do not belong in this group.
Okay. So you're like how I am. I think I was talking to us, we talked about masking, and I brought that up in terms of I don't feel like I have to mask in front of other people. It's around other Black scholars. And I did use our group as an example where I'm seeing all these highly accomplished Black women who were off the dome, you included. You know the study, you know who wrote it, you know what year they wrote it, you know what the conclusion they came to. And it's just like, wow, okay, do I belong in this group? But I don't feel that way around any other group. But another question is, why aren't our accomplishments, because we don't get to these stages in our career without feeling like, you know, it's accomplishment after accomplishment. You don't just wake up one day and you all of a sudden have a PhD or a high job. So I want to put it to everybody here. Why aren't your accomplishments enough if you've ever felt that way?
I'm gonna hit you with that Destiny's Child question.
I think personally it's because it's about comparison sometimes. Like you have an idea of what excellence is and you feel like you keep getting close, but you're not there yet. It's measuring yourself against what you see as excellence, Black excellence, whoever genre excellence, whatever it is. And so you're like, I'm just not there yet. And sometimes we're our hardest critic, right?
So let's talk about worth and perfectionism. So when we talk about perfectionism, a lot of times people say that people are perfectionists because they don't feel worthy, but I know it's rewarded the whole time that we're in education, up through the PhD program. You know, they train you to be a perfectionist about every little thing, and you have to because you're doing science, and you're supposed to check every little thing. Everything has to be just so, the way you format everything. So why is that tied to feelings of worth? And I wanted to put that out to Dr. Cupid. So what comes up for you if I bring up perfectionism and worth at the same time?
Perfectionism and worth, that's a great combination of the terms. For me personally, I think it relates to what Dr. L just stated when we think about our childhood experiences and how it was valued in the home, right? So I think when we think about the Black experience, and particularly think about Black girls and Black women, we were given more opportunity to become educated. When we look at, for example, the Great Migration, right? So parents purposely invested in Black girls being educated, and I think to present day, it has those effects. So if you're living in a household where there is a high expectation for you to excel, and you do that, it becomes the normal, right? So you're not really getting the positive affirmations or as many affirmations as you would like to receive. So I think even as you progress, it becomes like, yeah, the normal, like, of course I'm going to achieve, right? So we don't really hold space for ourselves to celebrate each other and our accomplishments because it's the normal. And why would you celebrate the normal, right? So when I think about perfectionism and feeling worthy, it kind of works against each other, because so often we're told that this is what is normal, this is what you should be doing, so why should we reward it, right? So it's kind of ironic that within some spaces in the Black community, it is the expectation that Black women and Black girls are going to do better in school. Statistically, we do better in school, we're more educated, right? So therefore, it goes against us is to have this space to say, hey, yeah, I passed my comms, like, let's go out to happy hour, right? So I think that's why within ourselves, it's harder for us to just sit down and be in the presence of our accomplishments.
Mm. And I think that's also because we're bringing up imposter syndrome because it does come up so often. There's even been like at our university, there was the Promise program. And a lot of times throughout the year, I know every year there's a whole seminar on imposter syndrome, but this is also a program that's meant to keep people in graduate school and especially underrepresented minorities. So it's not even just women. There were a lot of people in the room from diverse backgrounds talking about that they didn't feel that. However, I'm wondering why that is when, for almost like how you just said, that perfectionism becomes the norm, us doing well becomes the norm. And for me, if I've always been continually told I had to be twice as good to get half as far, like you have to do everything right. So I didn't feel like an imposter because I'm like, I've been doing everything. I think that maybe the first time I did feel like an imposter was going to grad school. And I was like, is this real? Okay, I'm going to get a fellowship for this. Is that something that's real? But then one of the first things I did was go to a seminar on imposter syndrome, and it kind of took it right out of me. But then also seeing all the other people around me who were feeling the same way, I think kind of squashed that up front.
Yeah, I think you hit that right on the head. That black tax is real. And I think that having to work twice as hard to get half as much, but that black tax gets compound interest when you become a Black woman. When you become a Black woman, that's the first generation to do what you're doing. When you become a Black woman, that's the first generation to do what you're doing from a certain income level. Mm-hmm. When you are the one that is trying to do this weird thing, like be a quote career student, because you just keep going back to school for whatever reason.
Right.
Not out here, doing the Lord's mission of serving everybody else around you first.
Right.
I say that with a fair bit of sarcasm and irony, because I bring that up to say that not only are these taxes like exponentially accruing income, it's because if we think about it from a community perspective, there's ecological levels to this game. Right? There's the messages that we are talking about, an internalized message, which is an internalized belief system of imposter syndrome. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live around other people. So other people contribute to this, our microsystems, our families, our communities. And then we move to the institutions that we're in, right? Like, what are the structural contexts of your elementary school? Did they bring the person with the best grades up to the front of the room and you got the special pink pencil like that baby did? And we work toward these things and we earn them, but we don't necessarily believe that we deserve them. And that's the difference. I love what you said, Dr. Cupid, about this perfectionism that's thrown on us as an expectation. And honestly, perfectionism is unrealistic. I myself, I'm in recovery from perfectionism. I am being mentored by women who've already recovered.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a whole thing, girl. Because this message that you can't make mistakes, this is what's expected of you, you come as one, but you stand as 10,000, sounds really empowering. But sometimes it's like, dang, I got to represent the whole squad. Like, I have to not make any mistakes. I have to, and I've told, and as Dr. Lyrical Tay told y'all, like, I'm from HBCU training. We don't slip. Like, we do not get stole on. You do not make mistakes. You get up there, you speak with confidence, you carry yourself in such a way that to this very day, I struggle with something you guys talked about when you talked about masking in your first episode, with this idea of, is it okay to be vulnerable? Can I cry? Can I say, I don't got this? And if I don't feel that I can, if that imposter syndrome is so deep, I start taking on more and more projects because I feel like I can't say no. I start maybe dropping some balls, or I start getting burnt out. And it makes me less effective. And it's almost like a self-sabotaging prophecy, because maybe I start to make mistakes. And as a perfectionist, you cannot make any mistakes. So it's a real tangle of things that come from multiple levels of the media telling us you know, don't be an angry Black woman. So part of my imposter syndrome also makes me have to be polite and know how to do this and use my voice like this. Oh my gosh. You know, and so it can look like a lot of different things. We get this message from all around us. So when we internalize it, that's just human.
And I think personally, I feel that the imposter syndrome, I feel it more when I'm in a PWI type environment. Like, I don't necessarily feel that when I'm speaking with Black people or people of color, but I feel like in a PWI, I've had people literally question my pedigree, question whether or not I was qualified to teach them. Like, you know, where did you get your degree from? You know, what gives you the right to be up here? And it's like, well, do you really want to know? You know, I've literally had people come at me that way. And so I think that gets in my head. It's like, I have to be on top of my game. I got to be at the top of my game because they're watching. They're going to look for any reason to say anything about anything. I mean, literally, one time someone complained that I use big words in the classroom. And they complained that I use big words in the classroom is trying to make them feel stupid. A student went to my supervisor saying that. And I was like, say what? I use big words in the classroom to make my students feel stupid? Are you kidding me? And so it's just like every little thing you're being judged because of the skin you're in. And so it's like, oh, I got to be on top of everything so that I can, you know, squash anything you coming at me with.
So when you talked about that in the classroom, in talking about that at PWIs, a lot of times imposter syndrome is also tied to feelings that one doesn't belong. But for me, those have been two different things. So I might feel like I don't belong in a certain place. But for me, that pushes me to, I think that's when perfectionism mode kicks in. Like, I don't belong, so I'm about to be a perfectionist and you're about to see how awesome I am. But imposter syndrome is like, yeah, it's something different for me. So I'm wondering what your experiences are with feeling like you don't belong and imposter syndrome.
I like the fact that y'all brought up the concept of the skin that I'm in, because I've only went to PWIs for higher education. And I don't think I wrestle with imposter syndrome in the same ways that some of my peers wrestle with imposter syndrome, because I do also think it's tied to whiteness, right? So if I'm one of the few Black persons within this space and academia is set up so that like white students understand the system, et cetera, historically, and it still persists today, then I look at it differently, because it's like, if I have the expectation of being perfect or being excellent from K through 12, then I already know that I belong in this education system space, right? So for me, that wasn't a challenge, because I came from environments that told me from a young age, like, okay, you're a Black woman or you're a Black girl, is the expectation that they're going to look at you as less. So you already have to be prepared. And also your Black excellence, right? So I did have that positive reinforcement. So I really didn't feel as though, oh, like, do I really belong here? I never felt that in regards to imposter syndrome. But I would say that some of my peers, for example, like my best friend, we were talking about imposter syndrome in PWIs, and she said that within the classroom, she's also a Black woman. So within the classroom, when my best friend Christina would give her opinion on something, the professor wouldn't validate it, her peers wouldn't respond to it, right? But then a white pair would basically say the same thing, and then they become validated. So she sat there and she said, am I the imposter or are you the imposter, right? Because if a Black person is able to articulate their voice and it's not being recognized, but then you go ahead and repeat the same thing, who's really the imposter here, right? So when we think about race and PWIs and imposter syndrome, I think we also need to question the ways in which the Black voice is invalidated by our peers and our professors. So for me, it also hits differently with in regards to imposter syndrome, because when I show up, I want to make sure that I'm showing up more so, like we discussed, for my Black women professors the most, because you don't want to quote unquote let them down, right? So I think that's how I view imposter syndrome. I want to make sure that I'm showing up for these Black women who came before me and are still paving the way. And also I want to show up because I know that there are other sisters coming up behind me. So I want to make sure that I'm also paving the way. So it is that burden more so, or the expectation, or that ministry, as Dr. L has alluded to, that I'm doing this as a calling. So for me, it operates differently.
I saw a lot of agreement there. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. You're talking about how there's some messaging you got that you were like, oh, I definitely belong here. I knew I was going to belong here. And I think, though, one of the things we probably hadn't touched on is what happens when you get the direct and explicit message that you don't belong here, right? Because this has happened to me. This has happened to my Latina friends. This has happened to my Pinoy Filipina friends, where someone in the institution has turned to them. One friend was at an Ivy League on the West Coast. She attended this kind of like a social gathering right after a class, and she was speaking and no one was really attending to her. And then she spoke up, and one of the privileged in-group members turned to her and said, no, you don't get to talk. So that was an explicit, direct, there's no, exactly. See how your face is? There's no other way to interpret that messaging, right? Like, you're literally being told, no, you don't belong here. And when those things happen to you in your development, right? Because that was during undergrad. You know, undergrad us is not the same as grad us, and thus further, you know, I had a lot more vinegar and steam in my undergrad years, and I probably would have said, if I was in your shoes, I would have said this and I would have done that. But how safe was that person at that time? You know, how rooted was she? Was she alone? No one stood up for her. No one allied with her in that moment. I know that during one of my earliest evaluations, pursuing my training, my latter stages of training, I got a feedback that someone wrote, such and such, she is too confident in the things that she knows. And one of my advisor queried this and said, oh, was she wrong? Asking me, like, was I wrong? And they said, no, she's just too confident in the things that she knows. And that was the feedback that was delivered to me as a junior emerging person in this environment. And I was like, bro, like, Scooby-Doo face. I don't get this. Like, my HBCU training says you say it with your chest. So I said it with my chest.
Absolutely. Right.
You know, and so I said it with my chest. I came in there, and that feedback really hit. And I didn't realize how far it had hit until I was doing my last stage of doctoral training, which is our clinical internship, where we work full time. And one of my rotation supervisors, who was a woman, who was a lovely Jewish woman, told me, stop apologizing. You said sorry. You said sorry more than once. Don't do that. Because women have been conditioned to apologize, and that's not what we do. And I know I'm not Black, but as a Black woman, they're going to try to make you apologize more. And I sat there in the hallway. I remember where I was. I remember what I was wearing. And I was like, wow, look at that overcorrection I had performed over the years. Because I came in, HBCU, say it with my chest, mentored by Dr. Derek Joseph Wilson. Don't not never forget that. Say it with you. And here, I'm at the last stage of my doctoral training, and I have course corrected, overcorrected so hard that another woman told me, stop apologizing. Don't say that thing. That was the correct answer. Why did you give it to me in a voice like you didn't know that that was the correct answer? And she straight up called me out. And I was like, when did I become this person? You know? And so when we get these explicit messages that are microaggressions that never feel micro, how does that like affect us? How does that balloon our imposter syndrome or plant the seed, you know? So there can be these subtle, like invisible.
Subtle, and that wasn't subtle, because stuff you were talking about wasn't subtle.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, there can be these subtle ones, but then there's sometimes these blatant, let me pull your card, you don't belong here, you're too confident in what you know. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to feel that way and to become that way and to let those feelings of self-doubt plant like a seed and then take root like a weed, like a pervasive weed that chokes the living plant that is your very soul. Because that's what weeds do. They're parasites. They go in, they attach themselves to the living thing, and they suck the life out of it. And that is what it feels like for me as someone who has struggled and continues to struggle to like extricate that root.
But even when you play respectability politics, when you are, you give in and, soften your voice and do X, Y, and Z, it still doesn't work because somehow the skin you're in is threatening. Can you smile a bit more? And so then you become you become an imposter to your own self. I've had a Black woman call me out, like, wait, who am I going to lunch with? Because I asked her to lunch so I could get to know her. And she was like, who am I going to lunch with? Am I going to lunch with Dr. Lyrical Tay from Baltimore? Am I going to lunch with this person who shows up at this PWI environment? I was like, oh, you don't even know me and you called me out like that. But it was real because I was trying to blend in with my environment so as to appear more friendly, less threatening, whatever the hell it is, that I became an imposter. And I know that's different than imposter syndrome. But when you talk about losing yourself, losing authenticity, and it's like, well, maybe I'll be nicer, I'll be softer, I won't say it with my chest. And they still tell you, you're a bit harsh, you're a bit threatening, you're a bit this small. Like, damn if I do, damn if I don't. Sorry. I see it, just apologizing. Like, I can't show authentic emotion. I can't be real.
Be real. We home. Come on. This is the home space. This is the whole point of it. So yes, we want you. Dr. Cupid would say you.
In regards to being a self-imposter, I actually never sat in that, but that's a really great point that you brought up, Dr. Lyrical Tay. I would say I had one experience in which I had a supervisor tell me that I talk too much. We were talking about Black education, educating Black children, school reform, and I am a Black person who has been educated in the system, right? So I think I can speak on that experience. And so in that moment, I realized that this person who professed to want to reform the education system did not want to reform the education system because she couldn't even reform her own mindset. And so what I mean by that is if you're in this space with Black folks, trying to do work with Black folks, then you're going to have to self-critique yourself and see the ways in which you show up, right? So I think at that point, I did get pissed off and I was just like, okay, well, you don't want me to speak, but I've been hired to speak. So why am I here, right? So then you begin to question even the validity of the people who you're working with, which I think it's sad in the sense that we don't get to do the work that we came in to do when you're then questioning who you're working with, right? So I would say in regards to feeling like a self-imposter, in that situation, I didn't feel like an imposter, but I recognized that she was an imposter, right? So then it becomes, how do I then navigate this space so the work gets done? So again, it becomes that mental balance because they're still in that position of authority. And if you recognize that they can't even do that own internal work, or that they're going to push against it, or say, oh, you're an angry Black woman, or call out white privilege, and then they become offended, it becomes difficult to really deal with people who impose things on you that you don't want to impose on yourself. So I think that's the ways in which I have wrestled with imposter syndrome within work spaces, is people wanted me to feel as though I was an imposter, right? But recognizing that, oh no, actually you're the imposter because you haven't done the work, so that the space is equitable and just, so we can confront our own biases in ways that create change.
And that point is probably why I didn't feel like an imposter, or didn't have that feeling after being admitted into graduate school and being around other people that I thought didn't quite know what they were talking about. It was an ivory tower mentality, and they're talking about things that I didn't think they knew anything about. So that made me feel that, number one, I didn't belong. Number two, I am going to bring the real, and I can feel confident in being a perfectionist, knowing I'm going to give it 110% so that I can feel good about things. And everything that you all just described is actually what Dr. Caretha Mitchell calls know your place aggression. So that white response to Black excellence. And even bringing that up in the context, Dr. Lyrical Tay and Dr. Cupid wrote a chapter in the book about Michelle Obama. You two could talk about that a little bit, and that they get into that a little bit.
Hold on, stop. You ain't gonna do that.
You did.
You got reference yourself
yes,
too.
we will. Yes, we will.
No. But okay, y'all brought the reflection. So anyway, let me like brag on y'all a little bit, because this is great. Y'all brought these great reflections. I'm telling you, where's my? Oh, I don't have a book down here. It's upstairs. See, I keep it.
It's amazing.
See, and so I want y'all to talk, because that came up then, like this white response to Black excellence. So, you know, y'all have written about that even in terms of Michelle Obama, but everything you just described, know your place aggression, Dr. Caretha Mitchell talks about that a lot.
Yeah, and Michelle Obama, our Forever Flawless, also spoke at, I think it was a graduation in London. She was a keynote speaker, as she always should be. And she said that she still struggles with imposter syndrome after being our Forever Flawless on the cover of like Vanity Fair, which is like the thing. And, you know, going through all of these things, she said at that graduation that sometimes she still struggles with imposter syndrome after everything she's accomplished. And that should she even be standing up there talking to everyone, you know? And so she spoke about it in Becoming. You guys reflect on the amazingness that is her. So how does that strike you two, that Michelle Robinson Obama herself is still, you know, grappling with these things?
I think a part of it too, especially in part of the reason I relate with her, is, you know, our humble beginnings, because I think my humble beginnings sometimes in the struggle, she didn't necessarily have the academic struggle maybe that I had in the beginning, but I think when you know, that song started from the bottom, now you're here. So you think about the academic struggle, the economic struggle, and you're like, okay, here I am, Dr. So-and-so, but in the back of your head, it's still Lil Tay from Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm here now, but what does being here now, you know, mean? And you remember struggling to write that first paper and your instructor asking you, like, where'd you go to school? Like, what did they teach you in elementary school? I was like, well, Baltimore City Public Schools taught me. But anyway, but you, I think a certain class may have something to do with it too, that struggle to think about those humble beginnings, but knowing, you know, as Dr. 99 said, that we work hard to get where we are. And I find it another reason why I connect with my Forever Flawless, Flomo, so much, because she recognizes that, you know, even in the title of Becoming, you know, we have not arrived. We are still learning. We're very much in process. And I love that. I'm like, yes, I'm in a process. And, you know, as I said with Fannie Lou Hamer, if I fall, I'm going to fall forward, right? I'm going to learn from whatever this mistake is and not being afraid of failure. And so I really respect that. Dr. Cupid, what say you?
What say I? Yeah, I think that also the process of recognizing that we also have to constantly unlearn. So I think when we think about being Black in America, it's always that miseducation that we're constantly going through. So these subtle and unsubtle messages, like Dr. L have already referenced, that we are always intaking, right? So whether or not that's not seeing ourselves in media, whether or not that's only having one Black person in the room, or having to quote unquote be the mammy in whatever context, that expectation. So it's that process of whatever stage that we're in, we're always unlearning these messages that tell us either we got to serve everybody besides ourselves, we're not good enough, or you should be happy that you're here. So I think with First Lady Michelle Obama, she's always going to get those messages that she doesn't belong, because she was not only a First Lady, but she was the first Black First Lady, right? So it's that ongoing recognition that she was a first, and the burdens that come with being a first, and that we live in America, which is, you know, a racist country, unfortunately, still. So we saw the media messaging that she also got, right? So, and she's still getting that So I think that's why she still is wrestled with that, because she still has to remind herself that she is still that little Black girl who was told that she spoke too loudly, you know, within her speech on Black Girls Rock. She said, no, it's not that I'm speaking quote unquote too loudly. It's that I have a voice and I need to be heard. So it's that constant unlearning and relearning that we have to do as Black girls and Black women, is what I will also add on to that.
I was going to say thank you both for that, because Michelle Obama remains the most educated first lady we have ever had. Let's talk on that. She's gorgeous. But also the thing about what I wanted to think about is when you said, you know, little Tay from Pennsylvania Avenue, and that's the thing you think about in your head, what about those people in our lives that tell you, oh, never forget who you like, oh, well, I remember you when you were such and such and such, and didn't you used to do such and such and such, and feed into that. And I'm like, I used to do a lot of stuff. I used to gel my bangs to my forehead. I don't do that no more. Like, I used to do a lot of stuff. I don't do that. I'm not that girl. So it's like, how do you know, how have you all, and Dr. Cupid, you spoke to this so eloquently as well, like, how do you combat those messages? We've talked about it as they come from external power structures. We've talked about it as coming from the patriarchal lens. I think we could speak more about the patriarchy, but definitely we spoke about the white supremacist lens. But what about it when it's your own? You know, and not just your own as in, you know, people who have the same race or hue or as gender identity, sexual orientation as yourself, but what if it's literally the people you came up with that tell you, oh, don't get too high and mighty, you still such and such, well, you not married, you could be a doctor all you want to, or you could do this all you want to, and you still ain't got that. Like, how do you deal with those messages from people who have seen you try to rise?
I've had, Dr. Lyrical say, I was going to say, speak on that because you've talked about that before.
Well, I've been called gray. I'm just going to speak on that by a very close cousin of mine because I chose to be in the academy, because I'm not out in the streets doing social justice work and community engagement work on the street corner on this. I've been called gray. Like, I'm not Black, I'm not white. One of my cousins said to me, you one of those gray Black people. I was like, what? Yeah, all y'all care about those Confederate this, taking down that. The average Black person don't care about those things. We too busy out here basically trying to survive. You know, they're like, I'm out here working with anti-recidivism, not the word they use, but they work with people who are coming in and, you know, handing out necessities, giving survival things. And so what I had to say is, like, you're needed there, I'm needed here. I'm not going to depreciate your value of what you're doing where you are because it's needed. But why do I have to be less Black? Because I choose to be in the academy working on this thing. I was like, Black students in the academy need to see my face. They need to know, because I was hungry for it when I was in my PWI undergrad. Like, where the Black faculty at? Where the Black staff at? So, and yes, I put at the end of my sentence with that preposition because I was hungry for it. I was hungry for Black people, Black culture. So the fact that I'm less Black because I'm behind the ivory tower or whatever you have it, it's like, no, like, I reach out to communities within these places. I reach out to my communities outside of these walls as well. But yeah, and it's not even so much that I've climbed, because as an educator, I don't make that much, but it's more so that I'm apparently less Black because I'm not out in the streets, quote unquote.
That's absolutely insane.
Well, we gray, so what we know.
But even stuff like when
that sounds ashy.
You need lotion.
Very true. But you know, I think that's why, again, the perfectionism kicks in. So when other people talk about, like Dr. Lyrical Tay talked about comparing herself to other people, the people who tell me that, something does in the back of my head. I don't necessarily have to say it to them. But then again, I don't get that a lot. I don't get that from family. My family, thank God, have been extremely proud of me. So I got that. But it's other people that might be, you know, now that we're connected to people on Facebook that went to high school with, who might still try to do the same things that they did. I'm like, you in high school and you still trying to take digs at people. And then I make the comparison and go, like, it would be mean for me to even have a bad feeling towards you. I feel bad for you. So when I start comparing, a lot of times it's comparing down. But when I talked about feelings of not belonging, comparing across doesn't work for me because I've always felt like the weird one. I've always felt weird, never felt like I belonged in a group. So but I've taken that, and I think that's what drives a perfectionism thing. And then instead of feeling like an imposter, I'm feeling like I just have to create my own lane for stuff. Like even doing this podcast here, it's just a lane where, I've been talking crap on the camera on the internet for 22 years now. So it was just getting another group of people together. Hey, let's talk about stuff on the internet. But that's part of my path. And then when I was in grad school, then it was feeling like I was two different people, because this was my life, with taking out to the go-go over here. And I'm like, I had a professor, adjunct professor, Google me once and tell me about myself. And I was like, that's kind of weird. But if anybody looked it up, they'd find out, I'm actually do this media thing, outside of this. And maybe they won't see me as a scholar and academic. And then after a while, I came to appreciate that, because I didn't feel like I belonged anyway. You're going to treat me like the Black person who doesn't deserve to be here anyway. So I have to be me in order to stay alive. It was like this defense mechanism. It was, after all the feelings of, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired. I can't quit because they're going to say I was too dumb to finish. I can't kill myself. They're going to say she couldn't hack it and all this other stuff. So in order to stay alive, I had to rip any mask off, just be me, and just keep doing with what I felt in my heart I needed to do.
You almost brought me to tears on that one, Dr. 99. Ooh.
It's real. It's so real. And I realize also now, even saying that out loud, I have to say that in case anybody else was going through something and felt like they needed to end it. Felt like I needed to end it, and then having to talk through that, like, what am I missing? What am I doing? And then it became, I want to do whatever I want to do. I was like, okay, this is self-talking to self, which my first book means that you talking to God in your head. But it's like, okay, well, do what you want to do then. I don't want to go around killing people. No, I just have certain goals that may not align with being a professor, what somebody wanted me to do, which I end up being anyway, go figure. But, all these other things, stuff like this. I have to, I'm Dr. 99 here. I might not put this on the professional site. I think that's something different, but I'm not going to shy away from this because I know it's needed. And I feel like we're doing this with purpose and for other women who absolutely need it.
Thank you so much for that sharing and that really speaking truth, right? Because this is what can happen. When imposter syndrome goes unchecked, it can really tie itself to either other pre-existing mental health concerns, like a diathesis stress model, where you already had some low levels of depression and then these kinds of feelings come in and now we're in a whole nother level. Or it could be its own etiology of mental health and anxiety. It's not just a coincidence that we're seeing such high levels of suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts in medical school training, in residents and medical students. It's the sleep deprivation. Yes, they have to do so much, but that imposter syndrome is real, right? And so we have to think about, why is it worth having conversations like this? Why is it worth talking about what these feelings might bring about in you, how they might, if left unchecked, how they might become insidious, how they might become something that could cause your mental health to truly suffer. And then it could spiral to any level, right? And so speaking about that, and as a trained clinician, a non-licensed one going up for licensure, I do want to talk about how, let's really have this talk in the context of what it feels like mentally and what it can lead to, any kind of risk that it might promote. And then what do you do when that happens? Always trying to figure out ways to help mitigate that, which is why we try to manage it within inside of ourselves. But if we have those feelings coming up and we feel unsafe and risk, and it starts to become an issue, seeking help, seeking a sister circle, seeking a licensed therapist, a licensed mental health counselor, even if you're only just going to call the 1-800 number, the crisis hotline number. That's what those resources are for. And I'm happy to provide the number to you guys for the show, but that's what those resources are for, because it can feel so isolating to have this imposter syndrome, especially since the very definition is almost isolative in itself, right? It's I'm looking all around and I don't belong here. Everybody else does, but I don't, right? So that in and of its nature really is an extreme precipitant to developing worsened mental health.
Do you all find yourselves doing things that proactively stop these feelings of self-doubt? Or if you start to feel it creep in, do you do anything specifically? And if so, what are those things?
Reach out to my sister circle. For real. Like, sister circles are good for your mental health. I don't know how many times I've been checked by either one of you, and also some sisters I've known back in the day who will quickly say, do you know who the hell you are?
And I will keep reminding you, yes, absolutely right. Dr. Cooper, what do you do, like, to just save off those feelings?
Mental, yeah. So in addition to checking in with my sister circle, I would also say, one, if you do have a spiritual practice, so if you need to sit down and meditate, pray, journal, so check in if you have any like prayer sisters. I know sometimes we also pray together, so that's helpful. My mom is a prayer warrior, so if I feel as though I do need that the spiritual side in order to balance these feelings, I take that lens. Sometimes if I feel as though I need to cry, I will cry. I think this season is also a season of mourning for a lot of us for a lot of different reasons. Of course, with what is going on, a lot of us have lost loved ones or loved ones are sick, etc. So just recognizing too that your whole life impacts you, right? So not just academic or professional life. So if you're feeling like you're getting to that space and you need to release, I would definitely encourage people to find healthy ways to release. So I think those are the top 3 ways that I recognize that I need to release. So checking in with my loved ones, which includes my mom, my family, my sister circles, journaling, write it down. I went to therapy before in order to deal with grief while also being a graduate student, because you want to finish at the same, it's like that, the trajectory, you want to finish within a certain time. Do I need to extend my timeline? What does this mean? Managing all of those roles. So I would say if you feel as though you need to reach out to a health professional, please do so. Don't feel ashamed about it. But when you think about spirituality, God blesses us with certain gifts, and I see a therapist as a gift. So really just to expand the ways in which we look at health. So those are the ways in which I balance those feelings when I reach that point.
I wholeheartedly concur with all of that. And it's not just because I'm a therapist and a come therapist. It's because I needed a therapist. I, searched around, and when you get with one, oof, like the spirit falls down. It is just, when you get with that right one. So therapy. It is not a luxury to have a therapist. It's not just something that rich people get to do. It's not something that only the people who are in the extreme crisis. You don't have to be at your absolute lowest point. You could literally sit up in a therapist chair or on a therapist telehealth session and just say, I don't even know what's going on.
But you know what, having said that, it feels like I didn't think it was a luxury either, being a psychologist, on my way to being a psychologist. But when I took that step to get a therapist, I wanted a Black woman. Of course, I don't want to call it a shortage, but there are not a lot. And, trying to find one and couldn't find one, then finally found one, but she wasn't in the network, and then I couldn't afford it and all this other stuff. So it did feel like a luxury, and it did feel like I had to do more leaning on my sister circle, spiritual practices, hip hop music. I'm a hip hop head. All of them battle raps that I've heard, I will turn on LL Cool J's I'm Bad, if I need to get in headspace. It was I Ain't Never Scared when, I was doing battle with the people in the cohort and all other kind of stuff. So a lot of those like everyday things I had to take to just kind of give myself as like I have theme music, CDs and all this stuff. So it's a whole lot of things that I have to do without the help of a mental health professional. And it seems like just trying to take that step, it becomes a full-time job trying to find one. I remember spending just days at a time. Let me try to match up, okay, who's in network, who's this and all. And it was a lot. And then I gave up. But I still think that it should be done. And I think that's why I like to encourage younger women who are in undergrad, like, hey, you might want to go to grad school and become a psychologist. If they have any interest in it, I start like pushing them that way because we absolutely need it.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a real point, that it can be a barrier to secure the therapist that's just right for you. And I encourage everyone to just keep trying, try out some people that maybe you didn't think of at first. Like, you never know, like if you can't get your ideal Black woman, you can try another woman of color. You can try a person who you can identify with on different factors, because it's worthwhile. If there are already students who are in grad school or undergrad, you have a university counseling center. It is free. They cannot turn you away, and they cannot tell your peoples. So it is confidential. It is free. It is right there. I used to work at one, and there was a fair number of graduate students that came in, and I should have had a clue right then what was ahead of me. But yeah, and so the other thing you mentioned was like, well, what do you have access to? And it won't just be one thing. You know, we're trained in the biopsychosocial model for a reason, because there's biological things, psychological things, social things. And I'm really a proponent of multimodal activation, meaning multiple things. It's not going to be one thing you put in your tool belt. It's not going to be just a hammer. A tool belt with just a hammer is a whack tool belt. You know, you need a hammer, you need a screwdriver, you need some pliers, you need a couple of things, right? So while that, you know, a therapist may be the hammer for some folks, maybe that's more specialized for others, but it can still be in a really good tool belt. Maybe music, your sister circle, prayer, putting all those things together for a comprehensive multimodal management is a more effective way to go about things. And it incorporates all these aspects of yourself, you know, of everything that goes into your own health, you know, your social health, your emotional health, biological, physiological health, and mental health. Those things are really important.
Absolutely. And I just want to take a note for someone who's had a mismatch and who had some therapy sessions that didn't go well, is like not to give up on it when it doesn't go well. Because I've had, for me personally, I prefer a Black woman just because I've had experiences with a white woman therapist who would question, well, do you really think it's about race? I was like, what? So for me personally, and that's not to essentialize white women at all, that's just to say that personal experience was not very great. And so personally, I prefer a Black woman who in therapy. But just because you have a therapist that you don't relate to, don't let that stop you from seeking, you know, other therapists, because there'll be matches out there for you. And one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, as they say. And it's so important to protect your mental health. And as Dr. L said, multimodal, all of it. Like, I just want to co-sign that, because there's so many ways to seek balance. And then sometimes, you know, you crying and you're like, what the hell am I crying for? Like, what is this? Because you don't know, like, because you survive you all the time and what's coming at you. Sometimes you don't know the weight that it's weighing on you, because it's all you know. Like, I get up and do this every day, but we haven't been taught necessarily to deconstruct what that everyday is and how heavy that everyday can be. And so being able to talk to someone and they'd be like, wow, you're doing all that? And you're like, well, yeah, because that's life. But life can be heavy. So, you know, don't give up that one time or two.
I'll take that advice. But Dr. L, you actually have developed a wonderful mantra for helping oneself get through times when we are feeling like we're not enough, or just other issues and times that we've all just expressed. So tell us and talk to us about what you call the 3 F's.
Yeah, so this is something that, like I said, I am working on myself. You know, I am the president, but I'm also a member of trying to dismantle this imposter syndrome. So on this journey that I've been on, one of the things like that Dr. Cupid mentioned was really helpful has been journaling and writing things down. It just kind of, I feel like, you know, I'm a spiritual person. I believe that the Lord speaks to us through the universe. This is something that really kind of just hit me, which is this idea of where am I right now? When these thoughts come to me, when I am feeling like I don't belong, what do I need right now? And when we think about where we are mentally and where we are physically, those don't always line up sometimes. Sometimes we are physically here. We live here in the present. Our bodies went through the past, but they don't live there. We're here, right? And the future has not happened, right? So how do I help my mind occupy the same space that I live in, which is right now, which is the present? So what do you need right now to help you focus on the present? This is where we are. And when we're focused in the present, when we're in the real time, we can take that time and that space that we need to just really center ourselves, right? To get that deep breath, to figure out, like Dr. Tay just said, like, I could start crying and not even knowing why I'm crying. Like, how do I figure that out? And so how can we help ourselves focus on what's happening right now? I know for me, I find, and this is true in a lot of Buddhist teachings and a lot of mindfulness, even the evidence-based practices that employ mindfulness-based strategies, that when our minds are thinking about what's going on, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, we're planning, right? We're trying to figure out and anticipate. We're trying to get into what's going to happen in the future, right? And the way our brains work, like cortically, our prefrontal cortex is all about these higher executive functionings for a reason, is to detect threats, is to detect, okay, let me make sure I'm safe. Let me make sure I avoid things. It's survival, right? And while that can be really adaptive when we have to like find shelter and find food and all these types of things, it can really trip you up when your future planning is all about, well, what kind of job am I going to get? What am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? Well, if I don't get this interview, how do I do that? So if we find ourselves in the future and we're forecasting, the way our brains are set up for threat detection, it's always going to make us feel anxious. It's always going to make us feel, that's just going to be the predominant thing, that we feel anxious. And when we start to feel anxious and we start to make our decisions and move our lives in that way, what a therapist told me, and it changed my life, was, well, if you're making your decisions based upon the future, that future hasn't happened because you're here right now. So right now you're operating outside of reality. So how, if we're operating outside of reality? And I was like, wait, isn't that like psychosis? Like, what you doing? And she's like, well, I mean, if you're operating like something is real that isn't real, what are you kind of thinking about that? And so if I don't know that it's going to happen, it may not come to pass. There's been several things we worried about that never happened, and several things that we never worried about that have happened. So having faith, having faith for the future can help me come back to focus on the present, because I don't know the future. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict that. So maybe if I have faith in either the evidence of things not seen, or just faith that I have no clue, there's no good reason for me to think it's going to be bad. So maybe it won't be, and then pull yourself back to the focus of the present. It's here where your body lives, right? The last F really comes from this idea that when we're thinking back and I wish I would have done this and I should have done that and I didn't do this and they said this and they said that, all of those words are past tense. All of those words, it's Dr. 99, it's like, don't shit on yourself,
Yeah.
Right? So the past is literally passed away. Your body don't live there. You don't live there no more. You went through there, but you've passed on, right? So the only thing that we can really do with the past to help us get some sort of freedom from that is to try to forgive. And when I say forgive, I'm not a passive person. I'm a Texan. I like to fight. So I'm not passive when I say forgive. What I'm saying is release it. So not just let it go, but literally let go of it. We're holding on to some things in the past so hard with our full grip that it doesn't leave us room to embrace anything else in these hands, right? So forgiving the past, letting go of it, and acknowledging I can't change that. It's already happened. All right. I didn't apply for more jobs. I haven't taken that test yet. Well, I have to let go of it and bring myself back here into where my body is, into where I live. However you bring yourself back to the present. For some folks, it's mindfulness. For me, it's mindfulness. Focusing on our body sensations, focusing on our breath, focusing on grounding techniques. If for you it is listening to music to bring you into right here and right now, if it is connecting with another person to bring you right here to right now. Because when we remember where we are, there's so much less tension. Our brains are doing fewer things now. Our brain isn't trying to predict future worries and feeling anxious. It's not trying to remember and recollect and ruminate and recreate and relive everything that caused us to feel ashamed or caused us to feel guilty or caused us to have resentment. You know, if our brains are pulled in so many directions, no wonder we're tired. No wonder we're, feeling this way. So how can I pull my mind back to where I live? How can I pull myself back to the present? So focus on the present. If you find yourself drifting to the future, you're feeling anxious, have faith. Focus back on the present. If you find yourself drifting to the past and what you wish you should have done and could have done, forgive that, let that go, and focus on the present. So faith, forgiveness, but most primarily important is that focus.
That's a word.
so many words. Keep speaking, yes. Lyrical Tay. How did that hit you?
See, why you do that?
Because I know, like we talk, we've all had conversations. Like everybody just got a word. I'm trying to trying to see something.
So I definitely got a word, and I was just thinking, why is it so hard to forgive myself? Now I suffer with anxiety, so thinking about the future is one thing, but also just being able to forgive oneself when you're like, damn it, I didn't have been afforded all of these blessings. I should be this. I should do that. I should be, and that could really beat up on yourself. And so it's more so just being where you are and being who you are and forgiving yourself. I think 99 sent me a quote one time about loving up on yourself and basically remembering to celebrate who you are, because sometimes we are so good, I know I am, at looking at where we feel we fall short, that it's hard to celebrate sometimes everything that is so great. And that's why I said my sister circle, because when I'm just like, this is that and that, and she's like, wait, do you know who you are? Do you know what you've done? She was like, have you looked at yourself? So I definitely feel that. And having family members too, because I know I spoke about the person who called me gray, but I also have family members who likewise very much support, and when I, play that past tense, when I'm ruminating, as you said, living in the past, Dr. L, people remind, okay, yes, we know you did that. We were there. We were with you. We got you out, depending on the situation. And so it's like, but you're not there anymore. Be where you are, be happy, celebrate right now. So thank you for that. Like I said, it's a word. I felt like I was at church. I felt like I was in therapy. Like that was needed. You had an amen corner over here, sis.
Oh, it did. Dr. Cuba, how did it hit you?
Yes, I would definitely agree that it was a much needed word. So right now I'm in graduation season. Today, it didn't start off as a great day, to be honest, right? So I didn't remember it was graduation day, and I think it was intentional that my mind forgot, right? Because I'm not showing up physically to that space. And I often only go to graduations, to be honest, from my mom, to just, honor her, like, you brought me through this, you stand in the gap, you prayed, you sacrificed, etc. And also for my loved ones who helped me through the process. So not being able to be in that space was hard for me because I know that's what something my mom looked forward to, right? So I can't change the times, but it's still like Dr. 99 said, do you feel as though you're in a season of mourning? So of course it does feel like a season of mourning because I've lost something that I've looked forward to, not just for myself, but for my loved ones, because we know like the PhD is a communal process. But luckily today I had 2 sister scholars show up, Sonia Crosby and Sierra Christian, and also Tony Hines organized it, that I was able to have a home side graduation ceremony, right? So then it brought me back to the present of, I'm here right now, let me enjoy this moment and be grateful, because a lot of people who are graduating don't have someone who showed up, right? So just to still have people to show up reminded me that to celebrate the moment that I'm in right now, to have gratitude. So yeah, I'm appreciative to focus on the present and to remind myself that sometimes the present doesn't feel good, right? And that's okay. It's okay to not be okay. But even still, if we can try to push ourselves to look at the positive, I think that was really helpful with the mantra. Yeah, so thank you, Dr. L.
I just have to say, that's another word. It's okay not to be okay. Like, yes, Dr. Cupid, thank you. Because far too often, especially the whole Black woman, superwoman syndrome, we don't want to show our vulnerability. So preach it, speak it. It's okay to not be okay. Y'all hear that?
I would wholeheartedly agree. It hits you with, because I live in an evidence-based world. So the science would say mindfulness, right? So mindfulness at its core is just paying attention to the present moment on purpose. Here's the big part, y'all, with no judgment. It just is, like literally no judgment. I think that's the part that a lot of people leave off, is to pay attention to the present moment, right? But with no judgment. It's just an observer stance. Like, that's happening. I feel that way. I'm crying. There's tears leaking out my face. I understand that. I am now kind of paying attention a little bit more intentionally on purpose to, I think I'm sad. I think I'm feeling, I think I am sad, because that's not the language. I am me. I am experiencing this emotion of sadness as I am myself, right? One of my favorite metaphors that we use in acceptance commitment therapy especially is, if you think about the weather, we always think about the weather like it rains, it's sunny, it's this, it's that, but we don't often think about, where does the weather live? What contains the weather? The sky, our atmosphere, right? But our atmosphere doesn't change. It holds it. It can hold all this weather. It can hold the sunny days. It can hold the cloudy days. It can hold the rainy days, the hurricanes, the storms. And it can, almost like if you were the sky, you can contain all these things and you are still who you are. And, and you can observe them, kind of take a step back, like, that is rain. That is sadness. That is this. And observe with no judgment, right? And that is the healing part of what it means to be present, right? Is to observe with no judgment, paying attention on purpose, however you become most present. I am a clinical health psychologist, so I love the body. Get into that body, get into that breath, get into what are the sensations, like just drawing your attention to where your physical body is, because your body can't live in the past. Your body can't live in the future. So if you draw yourself to your body, you're automatically drawing yourself to the present.
Word. And I want to say too, to parents, the better we learn how to take care of ourselves and model healthy, like mental health practices, our babies learn that because they're watching. I listen to my daughter and I hear things that I've said coming out of her mouth because even if I may not have even been talking directly to her, she's here, she hears it. And so, she's my mirror, I'm her mirror. And I need to model that it's okay, like you said, Dr. Cupid, not to be okay. It's okay to have a sad day, but we're going to get on, we're going to keep on trying, and you don't have to be perfect. So parents, take care of you so you can take care of them, because there are a lot of sister scholars out there who are carrying the mommyhood with the doctorhood.
That's true. Well, it looks like it is about that time for our affirmations. So who's up first?
I'll go ahead and start. I'm going to quote Dr. Cupid again because I feel like that's my my mantra tonight. Dr. Cupid said, "It's okay not to be okay. Take care of you, sisters."
Thank you, Dr. Larry Cote. I'm going to quote Dr. Kimberly R. Moffitt. And so the backstory of this affirmation is that when I was taking my comprehensive exams, I had a mental moment where I was just exhausted and tired, and I reached out to her, and she texted me back this message. The challenges of these moments are instances when we are allowing the mind to convince us of our inadequacies, but there is no such thing. So stay the course, stay encouraged, and stay brilliant. So I would say to our sister scholars listening, whenever you're going through a challenge, just to remind yourself that you are worthy, that you belong, and that you can make it through.
Thank you for that. Okay, mine comes from Dr. Caretha Mitchell, and this is from a blog she did for Black Perspectives titled Ida Taught Me. Be gentle with yourself too. Society never gives me the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't need my help in assuming the worst. And that definitely speaks to us needing to be gentle with ourselves. And when those imposter syndrome feelings come in, we don't need to help society assume the worst about us. Dr. L has
It's a word. I'm telling you.
Ain't it?
I wholeheartedly agree. I would add on that my affirmation is a quote from Audre Lorde, who I've been getting more and more into. And what she said, I think, speaks so beautifully to this idea of imposter syndrome and how do you really combat it and being present, which is this. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether or not I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. All right. You want to do what's your question, fam?
So our question for What's Your Question, fam, is, do you believe your body politics or physical appearance influence the ways you mask and how others perceive your masking?
I would think so. And I brought that up in that episode that I noticed that a Black woman who was darker skinned that I thought was masking, the mask still seemed to not work. Maybe she thought she was masking and putting on a smiling face and an accepting face and being professional and using tact with what she was saying, and she would still be perceived as being angry more than I was. So I was in that situation 2 different times where I noticed a darker skinned Black woman was perceived as being angry when she wasn't angry. I was the one that was angry or something, but I think that's definitely a colorism issue. So that's my story with that.
I would say ironically, because I am petite, my mask shows up differently. And I also often, people perceive me as younger than I am. So I think for me in the mask, I'm more seen as innocent or childlike. So when I show up in certain places and then I begin to speak, like, oh, you belong here. Oh, wow. Right. So I think, even when we think about physical appearance, it's also like, how does size or sizism show up in our experiences? And oftentimes people also tell me that I make faces and I don't understand what faces they're interpreting, but I know what I'm thinking.
I'm a face maker too, so yeah.
So I think that also influences the way in which I don't mask, because people tend to misinterpret me. So like, what's the point of me trying to perform if I know that I'm going to be misinterpreted? So I would say those are the two ways in which masking shows up. My size, in which was, oh, like, yo, you look younger, you look younger than what you actually are, and misinterpretation of my face.
Yeah, I think it would be impossible to isolate our physical appearance away from our masks. Like, by definition, we're talking about visual, verbal, and nonverbal. And that's just the way that our brains work. Our brains are taking in the visuals. So we're making these snap, microsecond, implicit types of decisions when we're faced with people. And when we face other people, these implicit biases really inform not only how other people perceive our mask, but our implicit bias for those who are throwing up the mask. Like, when do you throw it up? When do you don't? That's a very microsecond decision that you've made. So it would be impossible for me to be able to differentiate, like, oh, this is because of this body politic, but this is not because of this mask. It's how we live. So the literature would call that stimulus value. Every time you show up in the room, you are a stimulus. You have a value. So whatever is going on, you have like introduced yourself as a stimuli in that experimental equation, as it were.
I never heard that before, but now I'm going to keep thinking about that. That's something to meditate on. All right. Well, thank you so much thank you for being our guest, Dr. L. Thank you, Sista Docs, for all your contributions. And thank you to our audience for exhaling with us. Please join the conversation on social media and share with your friends. Thank you so much, Dr. L, for joining us and giving us your expertise. And thank you, Sista Docs, for exhaling. Thank you to our audience for exhaling with us. And please join the conversation on social media and share with your friends. Our hashtag is Sista Docs Exhale, and you can talk to us at Sista Docs Exhale on Twitter. We're also on Facebook, and you can also comment on the YouTube video. So until next time, we wish you love, light, and insight. Say peace, everybody.
Peace.